For 10 years, my world was the size of my mother's bedroom. The rhythm of my life wasn't my own heartbeat. It was the beep of her blood pressure monitor, the rustle of pill bottles, the shallow breaths she took in her sleep. I loved her more than life itself, which was precisely the problem, because in loving her, I was forgetting how to live my own. I was a ghost in my own story, haunting the hallways of a life I used to dream of, and the guilt of wanting more was a constant, suffocating weight.
That feeling of being erased by love, by duty, it's a silent battle so many women fight. Welcome to Unbroken Women. I'm your host, Susan Bentley, and today we're honored to share the profound story of Maria Rodriguez from California. Her journey isn't just about the immense sacrifice of caregiving. It's about the quiet, radical act of reclaiming your own soul. This is her story.
Before it all began, my world was vibrant. It was filled with the satisfying click of a camera shutter, the smell of darkroom chemicals, the thrill of capturing a perfect, fleeting moment on film. I was a photographer. It wasn't just a job. It was how I saw the world, how I made sense of it. I had a small studio, a growing list of clients, and a life that felt like it was just beginning to take shape. When my mother first got sick, I told myself it was temporary. I moved back home to help out for a little while. I'd make her meals, drive her to appointments, manage her medications. I could still edit photos late at night. I could still be both things, a photographer and a daughter. But a little while stretched from weeks into months, then into years. My ordinary world slowly shrank. My studio was packed into boxes. My client list dwindled. My life became a meticulously scheduled routine dictated by someone else's needs. Morning meds at 8 a.m., breakfast, physical therapy exercises, lunch, afternoon nap, doctor's visit, dinner, evening meds. The days bled into one another, marked only by the changing seasons outside a window I rarely looked through. To anyone on the outside, I was the devoted daughter. I was doing the right thing. And I was. But inside, the vibrant world I once knew was fading to gray. The weight wasn't just physical, though the exhaustion was bone deep, a constant ache behind my eyes. The real weight was invisible. It was the mental load of remembering every appointment, every prescription dosage, every symptom to report to the doctor. It was the emotional labor of staying cheerful and positive for my mother, even on days when I felt like I was crumbling inside. Friends would call, their voices full of stories about promotions, vacations, new loves. I had nothing new to share except my mother's latest blood sugar reading. Eventually, the calls became less frequent. I was living in a different reality, one they couldn't understand. And then there was their resentment. It was a vile, secret thing that would coil in my stomach when I felt trapped. And the guilt that followed was even worse. How could I resent the woman who gave me life? What kind of monster was I? So I carried that too. The love, the duty, the exhaustion, the resentment, and the crushing guilt. It was a weight that was slowly, silently pressing the life out of me. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesday was laundry day. As I was cleaning out a closet, my hand brushed against a canvas bag. Inside was my old 35mm camera, cold and heavy. I lifted it to my eye out of pure muscle memory, my finger finding the shutter button. I looked through the viewfinder at the sterile beige hallway of my mother's home, and for a split second, I saw it not as my reality, but as a composition, a frame of straight lines, flat light and shadows. A perfect picture of confinement. A deep, forgotten ache pulsed in my chest. It was grief. Grief for the woman who used to hold that camera, who used to chase light and color across the California hills. A question, quiet as a whisper, slipped into my mind. Is this all there is now? I pushed it down, fast. The guilt was immediate, hot and sharp. My mother needed me. That was all that mattered. I put the camera back in the bag, pushed it to the back of the closet, and buried the question under a mountain of duty. But it was there. A seed of doubt had been planted in the dark. The illusion of control, the fragile routine I'd built our lives around, shattered on a Thursday morning. I was in the kitchen, boiling water for her tea, when I heard it. It wasn't a loud crash. It was a soft, heavy thud, followed by a sharp, bird-like cry of pain. My blood ran cold. I rushed to the living room and found her on the floor, tangled in the rug, her face contorted in agony. The next hour was a blur of frantic motion and blinding panic. The 911 call, my voice shaking so hard I could barely give our address. The paramedics storming in with their equipment and their calm, urgent questions. Seeing my mother, so frail and small, being strapped to a gurney. The siren wailing as we raced to the hospital. In the emergency room, the world slowed down to a terrifying crawl. The rhythmic beeping of machines became the new soundtrack of my life. Doctors and nurses moved with a purpose that made me feel utterly helpless. They said words like fractured hip, surgery, complications, extended stay. Every word was a hammer blow, dismantling the fiction that I had everything under control. This wasn't a setback we could manage at home with some extra bandages and care. This was a catastrophic failure. My failure. The fall didn't just break my mother's hip. It broke the entire foundation of my life, exposing the raw, unsustainable truth I had been refusing to see. For the first couple of days in the hospital, I ran on pure adrenaline and denial. I told myself, we've gotten through worse. This is just another hurdle. I can handle this. I became a machine. I coordinated with doctors. I updated family members. I sat by her bedside, holding her hand, telling her everything was going to be okay, even as a knot of pure terror tightened in my stomach. I refused to leave the hospital, sleeping in the horribly uncomfortable visitor's chair, surviving on vending machine coffee and crackers. Because if I left, it felt like I would be admitting defeat. If I let go, even for a moment, the whole thing would fall apart. But beneath the frantic activity, the fear was a living thing. It was the fear of the mounting medical bills that I had no idea how I'd pay. The fear that she might not recover, that this was the beginning of the end. And a deeper, more selfish fear I was ashamed to admit. The fear that this hospital stay would become my life. That I would be trapped in this cycle of crisis and care forever. The thought was so terrifying that I couldn't let it surface. So I just kept moving, kept organizing, kept performing the role of the capable daughter, because stopping to feel the fear felt like it would swallow me whole. It happened on the third day. 72 hours without real sleep. My body felt like it was humming with a low-grade electrical current. My thoughts were thick and slow, like wading through mud. A young, well-meaning doctor came to give me an update. He was explaining the post-surgery recovery plan, the physical therapy, the follow-up appointments. He finished his speech with a gentle, professional smile and said, "It's a long road ahead, but we'll get there." A long road ahead. Those words, they didn't sound hopeful. They sounded like a life sentence, a long road of sleepless nights, a long road of canceled plans, a long road of being a caregiver and nothing else. And in that sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway, something inside me just broke. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a dramatic collapse. Tears just started streaming down my face. Silent, hot, and unstoppable. I couldn't breathe. I leaned against the wall and slid down to the floor, my whole body shaking with sobs I couldn't contain. I was weeping for my mother, for her pain, but I was also weeping for me, for the life I had lost, and for the future that now seemed like an endless, desolate road. It was the absolute, final, gut-wrenching admission. I could not do this anymore. After the tears stopped, there was nothing, just a profound, hollow emptiness. And in that silence, a new thought took root. It wasn't born of strength or courage. It was born of pure animal desperation. If I don't get help, I will completely shatter. And if I shatter, who will be there for her? The logic was simple, brutal, and clear. For the first time, I allowed myself to think the unthinkable. The idea of bringing strangers into our home, of paying someone to do the things I was supposed to do, felt like a profound betrayal, a deep, cultural, familial failure. The good daughter doesn't ask for help. The good daughter sacrifices everything. But the woman crying on the hospital floor wasn't the good daughter anymore. She was just a woman trying to survive. The decision formed in that hollow space, hard and heavy as a stone. I had to find help. I had to choose survival, even if it felt like the most selfish act in the world. The first step felt like jumping off a cliff. I found a crumpled pamphlet in the waiting room for elder care resources. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely read the numbers. I found a quiet corner in the hospital cafeteria, the smell of stale coffee thick in the air, and I dialed the number for a social worker. When a calm voice answered, I almost hung up. My throat was tight, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had to force the words out, and they came out as a choked whisper. Hello, my name is Maria Rodriguez. I'm my mother's caregiver, and I need help. Just saying it out loud felt like a confession. It felt like I was admitting to the world that my love wasn't enough. The woman on the other end was kind. She didn't judge, she just listened. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't panic or exhaustion. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was just the possibility that I wasn't completely alone in this. When I hung up the phone, I was still terrified, but I had done it. I had cracked open the door to a different future. I knew I had to tell my family. I started with my older brother, David, who lived 1,000 miles away and called once a week for a 5-minute progress report. I explained the situation, the surgery, the long recovery. Then, taking a deep breath, I told him my plan to hire a home care aide. The silence on the other end of the line was cold and heavy. Then he spoke, and his voice was laced with an accusation that cut me to the bone. A stranger? You're gonna let a stranger take care of Mom? I tried to explain, to make him understand my exhaustion, the impossibility of the situation, but he wasn't listening. So you're just abandoning her, he said, his voice rising. After everything she did for us, you're just gonna pawn her off on someone so you can have it easy? That's unbelievably selfish, Maria. Selfish.
The word landed like a punch. It was my deepest fear, spoken aloud by my own brother. I tried to defend myself. It's easy for you to say, David, you're not here. You don't see what it's like every single day. But it was no use. He saw it as a betrayal, a stain on our family's honor. I hung up the phone feeling smaller and more alone than ever. The world was telling me I had a right to survive, but my own family was telling me I was a bad daughter for even trying.
My brother's words became a voice in my head, a constant nagging prosecutor. At night, lying awake on the lumpy hospital couch, I'd be tormented by doubt. He's right. You are selfish. Your mother is suffering, and you're thinking about yourself. A better daughter would find the strength. A stronger woman wouldn't crumble like this. The guilt was a physical presence, a crushing weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. Part of me, the exhausted, broken part, just wanted to call him back and say, "You're right, I'll do it. I'll do it all myself." The known pain of my old life suddenly seemed safer than this new path, which was filled with judgment and conflict. Every step forward felt like I was wading through thick mud, with the voices of doubt and guilt trying to pull me back into the suffocating comfort of sacrifice. I felt completely lost, questioning every single choice, wondering if I had just made a catastrophic mistake. The universe seemed to conspire to prove my brother right. The first home care agency I contacted, the one that seemed so promising, called back to say the government funding I was counting on hadn't been approved. There was a bureaucratic snag, a missing form, a long waiting list. It could take months. That same day, my mother developed a small infection, a common complication after surgery, but to my guilt-ridden mind, it was a sign. A sign that I had failed by trying to delegate her care, that strangers couldn't be trusted. I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage, the engine off, enveloped in the concrete gloom. That was it. I was done. The fight had completely gone out of me. I had tried to change things, and I had only made it worse. A wave of utter hopelessness washed over me. The easiest thing to do would be to just surrender. Give up the fight for myself, go back to the way things were, and accept my fate. Resign myself to this life until it consumed me completely. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over my brother's name, ready to tell him he had won. Before I could make the call, the social worker I'd spoken to sent me a text. "There's a caregiver support group meeting tonight, just a few blocks from the hospital. Please just go. Just listen." I didn't want to go. I wanted to go home and crawl into bed, but something made me put the car in drive. I sat in the back of the room, arms crossed, a silent observer in a circle of tired-looking strangers. Then a woman, maybe 10 years older than me, began to speak. She talked about the sleepless nights, the endless appointments. She talked about the resentment and the crippling guilt that followed. She talked about a brother who lived out of state and called her selfish for wanting help. She was telling my story. Her words were my thoughts. Her pain was my pain. And as I listened, the tears started again. But this time they were different. They weren't tears of despair. They were tears of recognition. I wasn't a monster. I wasn't uniquely selfish or weak. I was just a caregiver. And for the first time in a decade, I felt seen. That feeling of solidarity was the fuel I needed. It didn't solve my problems, but it gave me the strength to face them. I left that meeting and became a warrior. Not for my mother, but for both of us. The next morning, I was on the phone, navigating the labyrinth of bureaucracy with a new, steely determination. I filled out every form. I appealed every denial. I documented every conversation. I learned to be polite but firm, to advocate without apology. I found a different agency, one that helped me find a grant to cover the costs while the government aid was pending. And as I fought that external battle, I began to fight a smaller, quieter one for myself. I started taking 20 minutes every afternoon while my mother napped to just sit outside with my old camera. I didn't try to create art. I just took pictures of the cracks in the sidewalk, the way the light hit a leaf. It was a small, quiet act of rebellion. It was me reclaiming a piece of myself. It was the beginning of the climb back to life. My life didn't magically become easy. I was still a caregiver, but I was no longer only a caregiver. We found a wonderful aide, a woman named Sophia, who treated my mother with incredible kindness and allowed me to breathe. With those few reclaimed hours each day, I began to find Maria again. I started taking my camera on walks, not just in the backyard, but to the nearby park, the coast. I started to see the world in color again. The biggest change was internal. The guilt, while not entirely gone, no longer had a chokehold on me. I learned that setting a boundary wasn't an act of selfishness. It was an act of survival. I was calmer, more present with my mother, because I wasn't running on empty anymore. I was a whole person again, and because of that, I was a better daughter. If I could speak to that exhausted woman weeping on the hospital floor, I would wrap my arms around her. I would tell her, I see you. I know your pain, and I forgive you for your resentment. And then I would tell her what I know now. Caregiving is a profound act of love, but self-preservation is a necessary act of survival. You are not a bad person for wanting to live. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Your life, your dreams, your spirit, they matter too.
Thank you, Maria, for sharing that incredible journey of survival and self-reclamation. Her story is a powerful reminder that our strength isn't just in what we endure for others, but in what we dare to claim for ourselves. If Maria's story moved you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe to Unbroken Women for more stories of true resilience. We'll see you next time.